Hello, everyone, and welcome to Casual Experts Only. We are your casual experts, Mike and Luke,
Yep.
and today we're going to be talking about the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy now that the third one is finally out. We're going to be talking about the movies, um, how they compare to the comics, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, potentially this could be the best MCU trilogy ever. A lot of people are
Yeah.
saying that. We're going to kind of talk about that as well as some news, Superman legacy casting rumors, writer strike, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, let's hop right into it. So,
All right.
first things first, I guess let's talk about the writer strike. How long's that been going on now? Like a few weeks now, I
I
think.
think it started on May 2nd, so about two
Okay.
weeks now, I
Okay.
think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so basically, there's the couple of main reasons for it.
Yeah.
One of the big ones is it's not really, I mean, it's kind of been happening for a while. There was a writer's strike about 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah. It was like in
Um,
2008, I think.
yeah, so
2007,
like
2008. Yeah.
13 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, basically, and since then there hasn't really been any changes. So like,
Mm-hmm.
writers are only making like 70,000 to 100,000 a year. So
Right.
like it's like a part-time job basically. Um, but another thing is the writers' room, specifically when it comes to streaming. Um,
Right. Right.
yeah, so like the studios are trying to make like smaller and smaller writing groups, and then
Mm-hmm.
like the time that each writer spends in that group is shortened as well. So it's like kind of a revolving door,
Mm-hmm.
which basically is it's resulting in like the writers basically being treated like gig workers and like
Yeah.
contractors instead of like full-time employees.
Mm-hmm.
Because like for there's a residual thing like in cable TV, for
Yeah.
example, when like well, let's say Cheers, like if an episode that I wrote of Cheers were to air, I would get some residuals every time that episode were to go on, and the same with The
Right.
Office and all cable TV. But it's not the same way with streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I were to write an episode for a streaming show, I would get paid once and that would be it. And like that's kind of the big thing. Residuals, the pay rate, the writers rooms and all that. And I think that Drew Gooden had a really good video on YouTube talking about the whole thing, and he goes into really good depth about it. But that's pretty much the big thing is the being paid and spending more time, because especially for writers who are starting out, a lot of that time spent is actually like experience, and then you can kind of like build a career off of it. But you're spending less time in that group, it's harder to get momentum, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard about that residuals thing, and like
Mhm.
I think some companies like Netflix and stuff are saying that they couldn't really track like how many times
Yeah.
has been watched, and that's kind of the reason, but that doesn't really make any sense because they definitely
No.
track that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it seems a little bit stupid. So yeah, there's that, and then also apparently Disney and HBO, like Disney and Warner Brothers or HBO, kind of released a statement to Writers Guild members. Um, yeah, apparently this statement says, yeah, well, this is according to Deadline.
Mhm.
Some of the studios are trying to make damn sure they show up for work. If you are a WGA, this is what the statement says. Um, if you are a WGA member, HBO/HBO Max respects your membership in the WGA, and you will not do anything, and we will not do anything to place you in jeopardy of WGA rules. Okay, so this is a May 2nd letter from the Warner Brothers Discovery owned division. I
Mhm.
guess that was sent out. However, we believe certain services, such as participating in the cast process and or contributing to non-writing production and post-production work, are clear examples of a non-WGA required service that should continue to be rendered during this time. Under the National Labor Relations Act, the WGA is not permitted to interfere with an employer's right to designate employees to perform certain supervisory functions, yada yada. So they're basically like trying to get showrunners to come in and like still
Yeah.
work. There's
Showrunners and producers, yeah.
as long as they're not doing like writing work.
Right, right.
So, and apparently, I think I heard that they don't want anybody participate in like the active protests. I guess like any members of their like any showrunners and stuff, like any of their
Okay.
employees. And Disney had a very similar letter that they sent out. So, yeah, seems like they're like, yeah, your strike's cool, but also come to work. No,
Right.
like it seems like the writers are kind of safe, but other people who are like showrunners and producers who also write,
Yeah.
are kind of like they're saying like, well, you're not really allowed. You're allowed to not write, but you're not really allowed to strike, even though plenty of
Yeah.
them have been striking anyway. So we'll see
Right.
how that goes.
Yeah.
If they're gonna try and start firing all these showrunners, like if they're gonna keep like, you know, if they're gonna keep striking,
Mhm.
and maybe if these companies want to try and start firing these people for that, we'll see how that goes down. But generally, writer strikes don't, yeah, aren't you usually great.
Right.
So I feel like these companies are definitely, it seems like from what I've been hearing from, like the statements from CEOs and stuff, they don't really seem to be taking it very seriously.
Right.
So we'll see how this goes. And like, there's been talk of, trying to use AI to write shows, which
Yeah.
really doesn't seem like we're at that level anyway, where they could do like
Mhm.
make
Mhm.
actual, decent content.
Right.
But I guess we'll see. I feel like lawsuits might come out of this if they try stuff like that. Um, but yeah, you sent me an article about James Gunn supporting the writer strike.
Yeah, because obviously he's a writer as well, and so it
Yeah.
was. I'm not totally sure. I heard some places say that he was maybe stepping down entirely, and not just like from the writing, but like completely, temporarily at least, from all of his positions at DC as well. That's kind of
Okay.
something I was heard, but then I'm also heard that Superman Legacy is moving forward, and so that I don't really know what to like what's true or not.
Mm-hmm. It seems like yeah, because I'm pretty sure he confirmed that he turned in like the first draft of the script
Yeah,
for Superman Legacy before the strike happened, and
right.
from what I'm hearing, it sounds like he still wants to hit a January production start date. So
Okay.
I'm not sure if he's still working on the movie or not.
Hmm.
But I mean, at the very least, obviously he's going to support the writer's strike. But I feel like he's
Right.
still working on the movie, just not with not dealing with writing. He's probably like working on casting right now.
Mm. Okay. Yeah.
Um, and speaking of Superman casting, there was this Hollywood Reporter article that came out just a couple days ago, just a few days ago, and it said that David Cornsweet, who's been like, there's been a lot of fan art and crap for him for years because he looks kind of like Henry Cavill and Christopher Reeve had a baby. He
Mm.
looks very much, like them. He's been kind of a fan cast for a while, and the Hollywood Reporter is reporting that he's in the running. He's like a top contender as well as Jacob Elordi. And this article also said that as for Lois Lane, contenders have been Emma Mackey, um, Rachel Brosnahan, Phoebe Dynevor, and Samara Weaving.
Okay. Yeah.
And there's also been rumors going around that Nicholas Hoult is in the running to play Lex Luthor.
Mm.
But it's like it's while it is in the Hollywood Reporter, these artists kind of still seems like they're in the rumor stage.
Yeah.
And James Gunn did respond to this with a tweet.
Mhm.
He said, yeah, what he said is, for all of you asking, I would never comment on who is or isn't auditioning for a role. That's the actor's business only and isn't something I'd make public unless they did it first after the
Mhm.
fact. For now, only one person has been cast in Superman Legacy, and it isn't any of the regular players in the Superman world. And he ended it with a emoji of like, looks like a merman.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting with
Mhm.
what cryptic message that means. Like could it be like, ooh, he cast Aquaman? Could it be, something completely different?
Right.
It's hard to tell. And then Justin Kroll, who works for Deadline, he's like a senior writer there when it comes, I think, like in the film department or something. He tweeted, to be clear, they aren't close to making a short list, let alone picking their Superman. So using terms like front runner might be a tad strong.
Mhm.
So it seems likely that more like these people have auditioned
Yeah.
or are in the running, but there isn't really any sort of, it doesn't seem like they're actually close to casting anybody major yet.
Mhm.
Which, speaking of the castings, and kind of goes hand in hand with Guardians of the Galaxy. There's been some like fan casting of Will Poulter as Jimmy Olsen.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I think he
Yeah,
would make a really good Jimmy Olsen.
yeah. The only thing for me is that he's tall. He's like 6'2", six
Mm,
three. So I feel like you have to have a Superman that's taller, or at least make him appear taller.
sure.
But then again, like and also he is like a larger dude, especially like he bulked
Mm,
up for Guardians of the Galaxy, but he
right.
was already kind of bulking up for years before that. Like if you
Mhm.
look at him from like 2017 to like 2020, he
Mhm.
definitely put on quite a bit of muscle and just kind of filled out. Like he's like 30 now, you know.
Yeah.
So I feel like either he would just kind of have to lose a lot of that mass quickly, which I feel like, would be
Mm,
probably unhealthy, or, or could just be like, oh, this Jimmy Olsen's into CrossFit, I don't know,
right.
something, but yeah, no, I think he looks the part a lot. Like
Mhm.
he looks really good. I just kind of hope they give him the classic red hair. I feel
Yeah.
like too many redhead characters like aren't redheads, you know.
Mm,
Man, I'd like to see a redheaded Jimmy Olsen, but we'll see.
yeah. Yeah.
I don't even think he was a redhead in like the Reeves movies. I think he had brown hair, I think.
Yeah. I think he was Brown. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's that. The only other real news, I didn't really like research it too much. I just heard stuff about like the Jonathan Majors case,
Mm,
and I don't know. It just seems really messy. I don't really want to comment too much on it, right now. But like his defense, says they have a lot of evidence
mhm.
that he's innocent, but then I've been hearing the stuff that there's a bunch of women that came and were cooperating with the district attorney's office.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really hard to tell at this point, what's going on, and like at the very least, it's like I doubt that woman beat herself up. Like
Right.
at the very least, there was an altercation and there was like a fight between them, and they
Mhm.
but at the same time, oh yeah, and also I think her testimony changed a couple times because the first time she mentioned him strangling her, then at the second time she didn't mention that at all, and like changed like the story a bit. So it's hard, and it's like so I think his defense is trying to say that her defense is like trying to get her to change her story or something, and that's why it's
Mm.
inconsistent. So it just kind of seems messy. Um,
Yeah, and I think it's really surprising because like even if he is innocent, it's still tarnishing in a way, and I'm just kind of
yeah,
shocked because
it still doesn't
Disney.
look good.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And Disney, they fired James Gunn over like a tweet from a
Yeah,
million years ago, and it's like that
yeah.
getting into a fight, whether it was self-defense or it was offensive, is still, I think, much worse than any tweet, in my opinion. But
I think
I
no
don't know.
matter
That's
the
just me.
reasons or anything, like at the very least, he did, lay hands on this woman. Don't really know
Right,
everything, but some people are acting like
right,
this means like, oh, it means he's innocent, being like framed or something, and it's like I highly doubt she like did that to herself because like
right.
the way the injuries look, like they would be able to tell if they were self-inflicted.
Yeah.
Um, unless you believe it's some crazy grand conspiracy, which is like, what? Why?
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, it definitely seems kind of weird, but there's definitely a lot of people who are, yeah, ready to like, act like he's being framed or something because of this. It
Hmm.
definitely seems weird though. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll definitely keep an eye on this
Hmm.
for all the developments. But yeah, let's get into the Guardians of the Galaxy
All
trilogy.
right.
Um, yeah, so first off, before we get into the movies like separately, I just kind of wanted to talk about some of the differences from the comics and
Hmm.
some of that stuff. So first off, like one of the big differences is the lineup, at least the original. So in the movies, the original like Guardians of the Galaxy are, like Star Lord, Drax, Rocket,
Right.
Groot, and
Right.
Gamora. Whereas in the comics, they were like I think they were from like the 31st century or something
Yeah.
originally.
Back from the 70s. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
basically. Marvel's versions of the Legion of Superheroes, kind of
Yeah.
from the future, and that's where Yondu comes from.
Yeah, because that blue guy's Yondu, and then there's Star. I keep forgetting his.
Starhawk, I
Yes,
think.
Starhawk, and then a few others that we
Yeah,
do kind of see in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 in an end credit
yeah,
scene. Like we
yeah.
see some of them, and there's Sylvester Stallone, Starhawk.
Right.
Um, but in this, they make them all Ravagers in the movie,
Mhm.
which I'm pretty sure Ravagers are original to the movies as well.
Yeah,
I believe the Ravagers were. Um, I mean, I think they're completely different, but I think there's another Marvel Ravagers, like
I
from
think I think
I
so.
think like the
Yeah.
Old Man Logan storyline or something. No, but they are from like Wolverine comics, I think.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
yeah, so I thought that was kind of interesting, but it was kind of cool that he brought all those characters. James Gunn brought them all
Yeah.
into the movies, even though they weren't, the original
Mhm.
Guardians. Another big thing is Star Lord's father.
Mm.
That's probably the other major difference.
Yeah.
Is Star Lord's father, who in the comics is Jason of Spartex. He's like the ruler of Spartex and
Yeah.
kind of a psycho. But apparently
Mhm.
James Gunn hates Jason. I'm not really sure if he ever said why.
Mhm.
But that's why he made Star Lord's dad Ego instead.
Yeah.
Which like I think it worked fine in the
Yeah.
movie. Like I liked it, and I feel like the only thing that would have been cool about keeping Jason is like the whole, I don't know, like space political intrigue that they could
Yeah.
have gone
Yeah.
with it. That could have been kind of cool, and seeing like Spartex and all that
Mhm.
kind of stuff. But oh well. It was. I still liked what they did with
Yeah.
with Ego. And it kind of introduced the Celestials, which I guess kind of the first one sort of did with like a little like Easter
Mhm.
eggs and stuff. But I think the other big differences are the origins of some of the characters, and
Yeah.
like with Drax, he was originally created by like he was killed by Thanos. Like
Mhm. Yeah. He was like a regular human.
yes, he was, and then he was killed by
Yeah.
Thanos, and then Thanos's father and grandfather made like a new artificial body for him,
Mhm.
and they basically specifically designed him to kill Thanos. Just to yeah, so I thought that was
Yeah.
interesting, and this is what he originally looked like, and he had like I don't think he really talked at all at first,
Mhm.
and he could actually fly, and he was more like a Superman character, is kind of or kind of like Superman meets Hulk,
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
And a lot of these characters had been around since like the 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
but they weren't really like together as a team until 2008.
Right, exactly. That's a big difference too, is that they were all like already established characters, and Star
Mhm.
Lord just brought them together. They
Right.
weren't like introduced in the same Guardians story.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the looks are different too. Like the original Gamora is definitely a little bit different.
Yeah.
And then there's even the white armor she has in the newer comics, which
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I kind of would have liked to see this in live
Yeah.
action. That is one of the things like I really wish they would have showed, but that doesn't seem like we're gonna get anytime at this point. But
Mhm.
and also there's Star Lord's, like he has more of a helmet instead of a mask
Yeah.
in the comics, which I kind of would have liked to see at least once. Like I didn't mind the mask, like it grew on me.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think that those are the major differences. I don't think I can really think of any other ones. Like I haven't delved too much into the Guardians comics at all, but
I mean, the only thing, it's not even really a major difference, but in the comics, Star-Lord's guns are elemental,
yeah,
but
which
it's not really mentioned in any of the movies.
it's not. I think they kind of are, but it's true. It's not really mentioned. Because he used, like, I think in the first movie at least, they show him use like they have like two different kinds of like energy or something that come out of it. Like
Mhm.
sometimes it seems like electricity, sometimes like something else. So it's not really clear.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot more like actual elements like fire and
Mhm.
water and stuff like that in the comics.
Mhm.
Yeah. So were you familiar with the Guardians at all before the movie came out?
No, I was not.
Okay. So I kind of I knew of them because when I
Mhm.
was really young, like probably like 7, 8, I went to like the toys section of like Walmart or something, and I saw this action figure set of the Guardians of the Galaxy, and I'm like, oh, who the hell are these
Mm.
people? So like I looked on the back and I like read the description, and that was kind of like the extent of my knowledge of them. I
Sure.
think like I looked up some stuff before the movie came out, but other than
Mhm.
that, so I was a little bit like confused sometimes, like, oh well, Drax is different, stuff
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
that. But yeah, so let's just jump into the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. This
Mhm.
was kind of, I don't know. I mean, like Marvel already had some pretty groundbreaking movies, but I feel like at the time when it came out, it was groundbreaking in that it took a bunch of really lesser known, like probably C-list characters, and really
Yeah.
made them mainstream.
Mhm.
And honestly, I wasn't sure what to expect with this movie when it first came out. I mean, I didn't know who James Gunn was. I don't think really
Right.
anybody really did unless they like watched Slither or Super or something.
Yeah.
So like I wasn't sure what this going to be, and like I remember walking out of the theater being like, wow, that was a lot better than I expected.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was really cool. It's really funny. I think overall, at least until the third one, I think this movie, the first one, is just like kind of the most consistent throughout the whole movie, like consistently like good. You know,
Mhm.
I really like there's a lot of humor in it, but
Yeah.
it's not. It feels like it comes from the characters and like it's fun. It's not.
Mhm.
I think it all lands pretty well, and the special effects are great.
Yeah.
It introduces a lot of Marvel cosmic stuff, which
Mhm.
we hadn't really gotten at that point, besides the Chitauri in the
Yeah.
Avengers. So that was all super cool. Great soundtrack, all that stuff. Like it's kind of hard to talk about this movie because I feel like it's been talked to death. It came out like 9 years ago now at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did rewatch it for before the new one came out,
Mhm.
and I gotta say, I think Ronan's a fine villain. Like,
Yeah.
he gets a lot of hate, especially like the last few years. But I think he's fine.
Mhm.
I think like he's got a clear motive. He hates the Xandarians because of their war with his people. Like, there's like I feel like there's not a whole lot deeper you could go with his character, and he's even
Mhm.
more fleshed out than in the comics. I think so.
Right.
There's not a whole lot else, and it introduced, like the origin of the Infinity Stones.
Mhm.
This movie did a lot, and it did it all really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's just it's kind of a comic book movie classic at this point, I
Oh,
think.
for sure. For sure.
Um, and like I said, like it has a good tone. Like it balances the humor with like the more heavy emotional beats really well, like the stuff with Peter's
Mhm.
mom.
Yeah.
It's just very good. But yeah, I feel like I feel like there's not a whole lot else to say about it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great movie.
Yeah, and now we have the second one, which
Mhm.
is a little more controversial. Um, we talked a bit about it in our MCU tier list video on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
If you want to check that out, but link to our YouTube will be in the description.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, so we talked a bit about that, and I feel like with this movie, I don't know. I rewatched this one too, and I think I rewatched it after we made that video. So I feel like my opinions have changed a little bit on it. It's really hard for me to compare this one to the first one. I
Okay.
feel like the first half of this movie is okay, and then the
Mhm.
last half is really freaking good.
Yeah.
I feel like the first half gets a little bogged down with like, I don't know, just like humor that doesn't land too much. I don't think, or at least
Mhm.
it hasn't aged well. It's just like, it was kind of funny the first time I saw it, and then the more I
Yeah.
see it, I'm like, um, stuff like that. But then the last half has like three or four like scenes that are like really like deep and emotional. I'm like, oh shoot,
Yeah. For
it's like
sure.
very good. And like Kurt Russell's great as Ego.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, the Sovereign are interesting because they're actually
Mm.
original to the movies.
Yeah.
um Aisha is a character in the comics. She's actually Adam Warlock's sister technically.
Mhm.
So that was interesting. But yeah, like there's that one scene with like Yondu talking to Rocket, which like kind of saying, they're kind of like the same, like not only in like their origins like not only do they have similar origins, but they both like kind of push people away because of,
Mhm.
their hurt and everything.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a very, very good scene. And like, even though I've seen it so many times, it still like gets me all choked up and stuff. And so does, the death scene
Yeah.
with Yondu and everything. Like it's really good. Like and it
Mm.
all works really well. And like that scene too at the end where Yondu has like the Ravager funeral.
Mm. Yeah.
There's just like so many great emotional scenes, and I think my biggest complaint, besides like some of the humor of this movie, is I feel like Drax kind of just gets relegated to like a punchline for most of the movie. I
Mm.
really like his relationship with Mantis and how that evolves throughout the movies too,
Yeah.
but the first movie kind of tackled like him being, like Drax the Destroyer and, him
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
kind of, a slaughter machine kind of. But in this,
Yeah.
we don't really see that. Like every time he's in an action scene, he just kind of gets his ass kicked,
Mm.
or does something stupid. And I
Yeah.
feel like he's supposed to be a lot more badass than that. Like I don't mind the humor so much because when it happens to be like with the literalness of it and everything. But I feel like this kind of started to make him a little too stupid.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's like all my like main complaints with this movie. Everything else is really
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Um,
Solid movie. Before we move on, I wanted to ask you about what do you think about the portrayal of the Guardians like outside of their movies, where it's like not James Gunn, where it's like somebody else. Like, what do you think about like in Infinity War and like Endgame and stuff like that? And
mm,
I guess Thor too.
um, Mixed bag, I guess. I
Mm.
mean, I like in Infinity War they keep Star Lord's strategic mind, his strategic skills, which I feel like honestly they in some ways they do better in like Infinity War than
Hmm.
in the Guardians movies. But then there's always like there's that controversial scene where like he attacks Thanos and stuff, and like
Hmm.
I don't know, I've always had kind of had mixed feelings about it because I feel like it's not super off brand for Star Lord, but at the same
Yeah.
time it was a bit stupid,
Hmm.
like it
Hmm.
was a bit like, okay. I felt like that they just kind of needed a reason for Thanos to, escape from
Yeah.
them. But I mean, I like that they actually showed Gamora and Star Lord's relationship. Like it's kind of hard because there's like a 4 year gap between the second movie and in Infinity War.
Hmm.
So I feel like, it's hard to say like, any differences are unwarranted because it's been 4 years.
Right.
We've seen, like we didn't get to see the relationship evolve, the
Hmm.
last 4 years. So it makes sense, they would just be like a couple at this point. Um, I felt like the dynamic between like Thor and Star Lord is kind of funny, but also kind of weird.
Hmm.
I feel like it kind of shows an aspect of Thor that we don't really see anywhere else, and I don't like it's kind of weird. I think
Yeah.
the way he kind of just kind of like horns in and tries to like almost take over the ship or something. Like,
Hmm.
why?
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I feel like it's kind of summed up in that one scene in Endgame where they go back and War Machine's like, oh, so he's just an idiot. And it's like,
Oh yeah.
I feel like that's not necessarily incorrect. There's more to it than
Mm-hmm.
that. I feel like in
Mm-hmm.
the James Gunn movies, the portrayal of, yeah, they're all like losers and idiots,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot more nuance to it than that. And I feel like these
Yeah.
other movies don't necessarily give them that for the most part.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's not terrible. I cannot remember. I don't have any thoughts about their portrayal in Love and Thunder because I don't remember any of their
I mean, they didn't really.
anything.
Yeah, they weren't
Yeah,
really in it much. I
yeah.
don't think anything was really like that spectacular either way. That being said, apparently James Gunn, I think, had to
Yeah.
rewrite some of their scenes in Love and Thunder, so I feel
Mm.
like Taika Waititi probably was gonna make them even more stupid.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the first half of Guardians 2 kind of makes them really stupid for the first
Hmm.
half, and then like in the last half, a lot of the characters get like emotional moments where, yeah,
Right.
I can definitely see like an Infinity War is more leaning into like this kind of the stupid
Hmm.
aspect, but I don't think it's necessarily like original to those movies. I feel like it's just
Yeah.
kind of drains, it's like it kind of put the characters through a strainer and like only gets like bits and pieces, which I guess is like kind of to be expected from such a huge movie. You
Right.
can't do every character justice. I think they
Hmm.
were okay. I
Hmm.
think especially Rocket got to shine, and then
Yeah.
Nebula as well in Endgame.
Hmm.
Which speaking of Nebula, like we'll talk about her more in 3. when we talk about 3, but I feel like she has like some like one of the best arcs in the MCU. I
Mhm.
feel like she's
Yeah.
had like such a like journey.
Mhm.
Going from villain to guardian,
Yeah.
and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But yeah, I feel like there's not a whole lot else to talk about them outside of
Mhm.
um, Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Besides, we get basically a rebooted Gamora now,
Right.
which goes into the third
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
Which yeah, what are your thoughts on this movie? We haven't really talked about it at all.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Honestly, it's definitely one of my favorite MCU movies at this point because
Mm-hmm,
like
mm-hmm.
I don't know how to describe it, but like for a lot of these movies, there is this sort of like this action kind of popcorn appeal to it. Where it's like they're not like masterpieces, but like it's still a good movie. Like
Yeah.
with Shang-Chi and Doctor Strange and all that. But like
Mm-hmm.
this is like legitimately like it's not going to win any Oscars, but like it's a legitimately great movie. Like
Mm-hmm.
outside of just like the superhero MCU-ness, it's just like it's a good movie.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. It was kind of a nice, I don't know, change, I guess. Like
Mhm.
from what you said, like a lot of them have been kind of just like popcorn. I think there's been like some really good ones in
Yeah.
there, but at the same time, they haven't really had as much substance, I think, as this did. And I feel like a
Right.
lot of it came from Rocket's past, but
Yeah.
also just the dynamic and the bond
Mhm.
between the different Guardians members.
Mhm.
And yeah, this is kind of a small thing, but I really liked that they had their like classic
Yeah.
suits like from the comics. The only
Mhm.
thing is, I really wish Star Lord had like his mask with it.
Mhm.
Kind of looked like this because that's kind of like what he looked like in the comic. That would have been
Right.
cool. Which I think that was my like one of my only problems with it is like I wish he had had his like more
Mhm.
like his like all his gear in the movie. Like his mask
Yeah.
and everything and um yeah, like I'm pretty sure James Gunn came out and said that it was because he left it on nowhere because they were just trying to get out of there. But
Mm.
I'm like, he couldn't have just ran out of the ship and like grabbed it and come back. Like I mean, I guess he
Yeah.
probably wasn't thinking about it at the time because they were in a hurry. But
Mhm.
at the same time, like it felt like kind of a weird choice.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the High Evolutionary, he was a piece of shit, wasn't
Yeah. Yeah.
he?
He was like a villain we haven't really seen anything like him in a long time. I feel like
Yes.
recently, like the best villain that comes to mind is Wen Wu from Shang-Chi, but that's kind of like a
Mm-hmm.
very different
Yeah,
different
very.
thing
I
together.
feel
And
like
I
Green Goblin is.
yeah.
I don't know, because I feel like with villains, like a good villain, you're
Mhm.
either going to like love to hate him or you hate to love him. Like to put it like very kind of oversimplistically, but
Yeah.
there's the ones that like you kind of like either because they have like a relatable story,
Mm.
backstory, or something that makes you empathize with them, or you just like them because they're fun to watch. Say like, um, Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, I think is just really
Yeah.
fun to watch.
Mhm.
And I think same thing with dang it, I just had it. There's another character and now I forget. Oh yeah, I think Daniel Bruhl as Zemo, especially
Mm.
in Falcon in the Winter
Yeah.
Soldier. They're just like a fun villain to watch. But then
Mhm.
there's ones that are like well written, like to the point where you actually freaking hate them.
Yeah.
And I think the
Yeah.
High Evolutionary is definitely there. Like he's one of the
Mhm.
only villains I can think of in recent memory that like I actively was like, I hope they freaking kill this guy. He's such
Yeah.
an ass.
Yeah.
He was just like such a oh my god, which
Mhm.
is like kind of the point, which I thought was
Yeah,
done very
exactly.
well, and it's
They,
like a
they nailed
little
it.
a little different from the comic. That's kind of what he looked like in the comics. I
Mhm.
kind of wonder why they went with the blue or the purple instead of the red, but yeah. But in the comics, I think in the movie they made him like they kind of suggested that he was an alien. Uh,
Yeah, based on like he said he has music from like thousands of years ago, and that wouldn't make sense if he was a human. But yeah, it's definitely implied that he's not from Earth.
Plus, he said to Star Lord at one point that he visited Earth a while ago.
Yeah,
Which like why would he visit Earth if he was born there?
right.
But yeah, like the whole thing with like Rocket's friends,
Mm,
that was just really well done, and the whole like all the experiments done on Rocket, like when they first show him as like a baby, it's just like really heart wrenching.
mm,
It definitely got me choked up a lot, and just like oh my god, that one scene where he just like where all his friends died. I
yeah.
was like viscerally mad. I was like, oh my god, like it was, yeah, that was something. Just so well done, all the emotional
Yeah.
beats, and I feel like he really toned it down on the humor,
Mm.
but in a good way because I felt like it
Yeah.
led to more like good character moments.
Hmm.
And like there was still humor there,
Yeah,
here
for
and
sure.
there, which I feel like people who were like very sensitive to like cringy humor or like fine that kind
Mhm.
of stuff, because like I have a friend who's like that and he did not like the that like those there were like a couple scenes that really like almost ruined the movie for him. I'm like,
Mm.
okay, but like yeah, and I feel like this movie had like the best action out of the whole trilogy.
Oh yeah,
Like
there's that one scene in the hallway that I think it's like
yes,
an unbroken shot for like 3 minutes. I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's
The hallway
incredible.
fight. Yeah, it's very good. I was like, wow. And even like the lead up to it, like
Mm.
it's kind of like the cool because like they have kind of come a long way because in the first movie they had a scene kind of like this, but they kind of made a joke out of it where they were like, at
Mm.
first they were walking cool,
Yeah.
and then they kind of like yawned or were just like, oh whatever. This was
Mhm.
like actively just like, nope, they're just badass.
Right.
I
Right.
thought that was cool. And yeah, and that's something too. Like it wasn't perfect, but I feel like this really gave Drax time to shine.
Mm.
Because there were several scenes where it really showed, like, oh yeah, that's right, he's strong as hell.
Right.
Like there were a few fighting shots, and like when he fought Adam Warlock, like he kind of held his own for a minute there,
Mhm.
and that one scene where he just like broke down the door to High Evolutionary Ship or something.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that was cool, and they gave Mantis a lot to do too. She was actually pretty cool.
Mhm.
I wasn't a huge fan of her in the second movie. She was okay, like she was an alright character, but I had a hard time like being like, how is she that valuable to the team? Besides occasionally when they need to put somebody to sleep.
Right.
But this, like, she grew on me, but then this gave her a lot to do. Like, I feel like all the characters were kind
Yeah.
of at their
Yeah.
best, which
Right.
I thought was a great way to end,
Mhm.
a trilogy. Uh, yeah. What did you think of Adam Warlock? Because I know like it's kind of controversial. Like, I don't think as many people dislike it as I
Yeah.
expected, but there's definitely some naysayers.
I mean, like, yeah, they changed him quite a bit. Like originally, Adam Warlock had a much bigger play in the Infinity Gauntlet whole saga, I guess you could say. But
Right. Yeah.
it, if you were to have an Adam Warlock outside of that context, I feel like they
Yes.
did a pretty good job with it.
Yes.
He is rather goofy, but I don't really mind it. I feel like he's for what he's done for. I feel like he did a really good job with what he was given.
Yeah. I think I kind of gave up on having a like crazy powerful like godlike Adam Warlock
Mhm.
since like when they didn't put him in an Infinity War or Endgame. I kind of figured
Right.
after the end credit scene of the second movie that he was going to show up and be a big part of like Infinity War, like he
Right.
was in the comics. I mean, even
Right.
the stone on his forehead is the soul stone
Hmm.
or the
Hmm.
soul gem in the comics. But
Yeah.
I kind of gave up on seeing that when he didn't show up. And I was like,
Hmm.
that's kind of like the best way to utilize that character. Like he's definitely done things since then,
Yeah.
but that was kind of like a big, huge part of his origin in the comics, and well, not really
Hmm.
origin, but like his arc.
Yeah.
And in the comics, he did originally work for High Evolutionary
Hmm.
briefly, so I think it made sense. And they also threw that curveball that he created the Sovereign, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like, yeah, I didn't mind it, especially considering it's like an origin for him.
Hmm.
Now if they never do anything with him later on in the MCU, I'll be a little bit upset. Considering how kind of powerful he's supposed to be in the comics, and like how
Right.
big of a role he has in the Marvel universe. But I think Will Poulter did a really good job. I think they
Hmm.
did a good job making him like this really powerful character while also having like a personality.
Yeah.
Like I feel
Yeah.
like the goofiness came more just from him being like a newborn basically. um
Exactly. Exactly.
which I think like it made sense. They even said that. Like she even said he's like out of his cocoon like too early.
Hmm.
Aisha
Hmm.
said that. Like I think it worked fine, but then there's also plenty of scenes where he's they show he's powerful, like when he took on the Guardians
Right.
single handedly, and when he this like ripped that like I think its name was War Pig. He just like
Mm.
ripped its head off, without really
Yeah.
like without any sort of um effort. And I did like his arc. He started out as kind of like a villain, and then like throughout by
Yeah.
the end of the movie he was like one of them, which
Hmm.
was pretty cool. And I think that made sense because like, he never seen he wasn't like an evil character. He was just trying
Right.
to like do what
Right.
his mom wanted basically.
Mhm.
and to protect her. So I felt like that was pretty authentic, and
Yeah.
I really hope they do more with him, whether it's
Mhm.
like with Guardian stuff or his own stuff. I would really
Mhm.
be into
Mhm.
seeing that. Uh, so yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else to talk about this movie. I can't think. I don't think
I
there's
mean,
anything else.
I just had like a couple of like, I mean, I love this movie, but there's a couple of things that like a couple nitpicks. Like,
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, there was that one part where Star-Lord like jumps out of the ship,
Yeah.
but it's like, but then he doesn't die, but
I
it's like, why is
I
that there?
Yeah, I feel like there were three or four fake outs where it seemed like somebody was gonna
Yeah,
die. And
yeah.
after the second one, I was like, yeah, I hope there's no more. And then there was more. I feel like there was
Mhm.
like one or two too many fake outs, which I
Right.
don't feel like somebody needed to die, because especially
Yeah,
considering how many people on the internet were like, somebody's gonna die, somebody's gonna die.
right.
I felt like it was almost like subverting expectations to not let anybody die. you
Exactly,
know
exactly.
and also by the end it's like it felt really earned, and I didn't want
Mhm.
anybody to die.
Right.
I was happy everybody made it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like the Star-Lord one at the end was kind of gratuitous. Like
Yes.
it really seemed like he died for a second, but I was mad, not just because he died, but because I thought he died, but because it's like he died because he went back for his Zune.
Right.
Like they went through all that crap, and then he's just gonna die like that, and then they had it.
Yeah.
Like I was expecting Adam Warlock to come save him, but it took way
Mhm.
longer than I expected.
Right.
Um, and then like he brings him back, and he's all like bloated and stuff, from being out in the atmosphere, or the lack of atmosphere out in the space, and then he's like, oh
Yeah.
no no, I'm fine. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
all right.
Exactly.
Kind of felt like that scene in No Way Home where Toby's Peter gets stabbed,
Mm.
and then he's like, "No, I'm fine. I've been stabbed before." It's like, well, then why did you? Okay,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, that I think. Yeah, I agree. That was a nitpick for me. There was something else. I'm trying to remember.
And like the
Um,
only other flaw for me is again
mhm,
it's a nitpick is that the music in I mean there are some good music, but like the music overall is less iconic as the first two.
mhm.
I don't know. I mean that's like not even really a criticism, but it's just like, I don't know.
I
I'm
feel
more
like,
likely to grab the soundtrack from the first two than this one, but I mean there's some good songs in there.
yeah, I would say. I mean, I really like probably half of the music in it, and the
Yeah.
rest I'm like indifferent to, I think.
Right.
And I feel
Right.
like they didn't utilize the soundtrack as well as the last two movies. 'Cause I
Mhm.
feel like the last two were like really weaved it into the story really well, and like
Right.
either actually addressing the music or just like
Mhm.
how like it was being played. This was just kind of like, oh, it's playing in the ship, and that's
Right.
pretty much it.
Right. Right.
And there was one scene where I feel like it really didn't fit. The song really
Mhm.
didn't fit what was going on. Like I didn't care too much because I was enjoying the song and everything. But
Yeah.
like I think it was like at the beginning when they first realized they need to go to that like Orocorp or whatever to save
Mhm.
Rocket. And it was kind of like a really dire scene, and then they start playing like a really upbeat like rock song,
Mhm.
and I'm like I like the song, but I was like, huh, this is like
Right.
almost a little bit jarring the first time. I'm like, huh, why is this being played right then?
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, yeah. Speaking of soundtrack, which movie do you think has the best?
Probably number two, I think, it probably
Mm,
has the most good songs
yeah, no,
in it.
I agree. I feel like the first one has like three really iconic ones, either because they were
Yeah.
already like pretty iconic and popular,
Mhm.
or they, be like Come and Get Your Love became really iconic after the movie came
Yeah.
out. But yeah, the second one, like there was songs I hadn't heard that I ended up really liking, songs that I had heard
Right.
that I really liked and just kind of like rediscovered them. So yeah, I feel like the second one
Mhm.
has the best
Yes.
soundtrack. Uh, yeah. One of the last things I want to talk about. What's your favorite version of Groot? We have
Mhm.
the original Groot. We
Yeah.
have Baby Groot. There's Teen Groot, I guess, which we technically saw more like in Infinity War, but a
Yeah.
little bit in the end credit scene of Guardians 2. And then there's
Mhm.
Buff Groot.
Mhm.
And I guess
Um,
technically there's like really even bigger Groot in the end credit scene
yeah.
of Guardians 3, but
Yeah. I mean, probably the one I like most is just the original one
yeah.
from the first movie.
I
Uh,
agree, and then I think Buff Groot would probably be like a second.
yeah.
Though I mean I like them all for.
Yeah, I
different
mean
reasons,
they
but
serve their part in the story, you know.
yeah.
But yeah, I guess that the original just looks the best to me.
Yeah, he has a certain charm
Hmm.
too, and like he looks the best, and like he's cool while at the same
Yeah.
time, being kind of lovable.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which I thought was cool. But I really liked the end one at the end credit scene of
Yeah.
Guardians 3, where he's just a freaking tank now. He's huge.
Hmm.
Which
Hmm.
yeah, what do you think of the new lineup of
Yeah,
Guardians?
after the end credit scene of Guardians 2, and around that same time, James Gunn said that, and this was before he was fired. He
Hmm.
said that 3 was going to be the last one
Yeah,
for him at least.
yeah.
And so I just assumed like, well, after this, they're going to go back to the original, the Guardians 3000 team, as they're
Me
referred to.
too. Yeah,
But they didn't really do that. They're in the movie, but they're not really they don't really play that big a part in the movie. The team that they went with, I'm not sure. It seems kind of weak to me. Like I don't
mm,
know if this group of characters could hold their own movie, if there
yeah,
is going to be another Guardians movie in the future. I don't know.
yeah. I feel like Rocket and Groot are still a part of it, and I
Right.
kind of assumed Kraglin was already part of the team, even though he kind of wasn't
Mhm.
in it for most of it, so it's fine. I
Yeah.
feel like Adam Warlock is definitely going to be like their heavy hitter,
Right.
besides maybe Groot, which I thought was interesting. But
Mhm.
then there's like that one girl that was
Yeah.
thrown in there.
Yeah. She's supposed to be Quasar.
Right, she's
Um,
supposed to be in the comics. She was Marvel's daughter,
yes.
which in
Yes.
this, like, I don't know what they're going to do because obviously Marvel had like a really small role,
Right.
gender bended role in
Mhm.
Captain Marvel. So
Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do with with her.
Right.
Plus, she was one of High Evolutionary's experiments. So
Mhm. Mhm.
and then there's Cosmo as well, which I feel like Cosmo works better as like a side character than an actual
Yeah.
like Guardian. But
Yeah. Well, in the original 2008 one, she was a member of the team in
oh,
the original.
gotcha. Okay,
Yeah. So I'm
interesting.
surprised it took her this long, but
Yeah,
whatever. She was good.
yeah. Would you have preferred them be the like original? Because we do have the original characters in the movies. Would you have preferred that, or like what we have the lineup we have now?
So you mean the original, like the 2008 one, or like what do you
No,
mean by original?
like the like Starhawk
Oh, okay.
and
Yeah.
obviously not Yondu, but
Yeah. Yeah. There's,
and
yeah,
Martin X and whoever
Martin X
else.
and
Yeah,
Major Victory and yeah, all that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I would have maybe preferred that.
Hmm.
Because it just seems like they're more like unique and each character's clearly defined as to who they are,
Hmm.
at least to someone who's familiar with the comics. I don't know for the casual viewers, but yeah, I would have probably preferred that over this,
Hmm.
but I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of was expecting it, and I kind of see what you're saying, but I kind of feel like they weren't really developed either. Where I
Sure.
feel like I feel like all the characters besides maybe what's a really little girl,
Mhm.
they all kind of were given like more of a
Sure.
you know chance to shine at some point, and we do still have two of the originals and one
Mhm.
who has
Mhm.
kind of always been on the team, but not really, in
Yeah.
Kraglin. So yeah, I'm curious to see where they go with it, if
Mhm.
really anywhere. But and there's also the other end credit scene where like they already showed Star Lord going back to his grandfather, which I am glad they finally
Yeah.
picked up that plot thread and saw it through because
Mhm.
he was in the second movie very briefly when Ego was
Yeah.
like taking over the planet. And I
Mhm.
was wondering, like, is he just gonna kind of keep showing up in like almost like an Easter egg form? But I'm really glad they actually kind of like it's not really I wouldn't say a completion of Peter's arc, but it
Yeah.
is. I felt like something like on his to do list that they hadn't really shown yet, and I felt like it was a
Mhm.
good
Mhm.
scene with them reuniting everything. And that tag at the end was interesting. The legendary Star Lord will return.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know some people are saying that it's a reference to the legendary Star Lord comic series. I think
Mhm.
it was like a mini series in like 2014, and it led into
Sounds
Secret
about right. Yeah.
Wars. So people are saying like, oh, he's gonna come back and it's gonna lead into Secret Wars, but I don't know if I see him
Mm.
being in anything else until Secret Wars at this point. Because
Right.
Secret Wars, unless it's affected by the writer
Yeah.
strike and everything,
Yeah.
it's probably not going to come out till at least 2026, 2027. So,
Mhm.
and they already have
Yeah.
a full lineup of movies.
Yeah. Some people are saying that maybe someone else will become Star-Lord, take up the mantle.
Mm,
To me, it seems probably most likely that he'll probably just get like a a mini series on Disney Plus or something like that. That's what
Mm.
it seems like to me, and he'll just have like a little solo adventure or something like that.
Yeah, I
I'm not
see.
really sure.
I see that happening, and also like it's probably not going to happen either. But in that series, he got together with Kitty Pryde.
Yeah.
So it is, possible that maybe like they use him to kind of introduce an X-Men character or two at some point.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll definitely see, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the Guardians of the Galaxy
Yeah.
trilogy. What do you think this is the best trilogy? Because I feel like. I mean, Thor probably wouldn't be in the running anyway,
Right.
even before Love and Thunder came out. But yeah,
Mhm. Yeah, well, part of the thing is when I think of a trilogy, it has to be three movies that tie together really
mm-hmm,
well.
mm-hmm,
And like that, when you look at all the three
yeah,
movies, that doesn't really happen in the MCU a whole lot.
yeah,
So like definitely this almost by default, it's the best trilogy for me.
right,
The only one that comes really close to having all three tie together is Iron Man, but like I
yeah.
wouldn't say that's the best
But
trilogy
they're
either.
very up and down in quality, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, yeah.
Um, I think for me, I mean, my favorite is still going to be the Captain America trilogy.
Sure.
But like you said, it's true. Like Guardians of the Galaxy is really the only one that really ties together well, besides maybe
Mhm.
the Spider-Man ones.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but even the last one was more of like an event film.
Right. Yeah, because like there's a little bit of in the first two, there's a whole lot of that high school kind of
Yeah.
antics happening, and there's a little bit of that in the beginning, but there's not like it kind of goes away from that as the week goes on.
Yeah, and even the Captain America ones, like the first two are pretty self-contained, and then the third one's
Mhm.
like an Avengers movie. So the
Yeah, I mean,
Guardians, yeah.
there is an argument to be made about the Captain America, how it's like you can say like the whole trilogy revolves around his relationship with Bucky, and then you can kind of say, well, that's
Yeah.
kind of ties together in a way, but you're right, it's more of a crossover thing.
Yeah. So I think like as far as like an actual like solid trilogy goes, like Guardians of the
Yeah,
Galaxy is easily like just
right.
that
Yeah.
definitely. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for listening.
Mhm.
This comes out. Oh yeah, new day. That this comes out every other Wednesday instead of
Mhm.
Monday. And the actual it goes up on like podcast platforms then, and then the following week it goes up on our YouTube channel.
Mhm.
If you want to check us out on social media, it's casual_experts, pretty much on all pretty much major
Yeah, everywhere it matters.
yeah, right. Yeah, and maybe even a couple that don't. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you
Yeah.
again for listening/watching. This is YouTube,
Mhm.
and we'll see you next time.
Peace.